The story of the Coffin of Andy and Leyley is one that revolves around a small group of characters who perform horrific acts for both necessary and unnecessary reasons. The visual novel is entirely framed through the perspective of the two siblings, Ashley and Andrew, their inner monologues and how they interact with the world and people around them. This video has been recorded as a way for me to express my thoughts about the game and to perhaps lay out a groundwork for others to expand upon them. The story deals with incredibly dark themes. If you're likely to be disturbed by this, I suggest you click away. There will be no restriction on spoilers. We cannot take the full weight of actions committed by anybody in this world without acknowledging the context they were performed in. Part of the reason that I think that the story is so impactful is that the two siblings' depravity doesn't truly stand out when compared to everything that happens around them. The culture of their settings is an odd blend of most of the Anglosphere. I had assumed it took place in the USA, perhaps in Alabama. It turns out, though, that the setting is a completely fictional country in Northern Europe with a culture most similar to Canada and the UK. The hitman uses a knife, so we could assume that guns aren't that widely available. The only one we see in the game is in the hands of an authority figure, which then moves to the hands of a much better authority figure. Okay, so that's the first question answered. And here we also see confirmation that the time period for this setting is the 90s and early aughts. We can see that the Graves have a rotary phone in their apartment, and old-style fat box TVs seem to be everywhere. The cultists all use boom boxes, and we can even see that the style of cars in game are a throwback to this time period. Now that we know this, we can understand how normal life would be in this setting, for the most part. The time period limits the technology of the world significantly compared to how it would be if the time period were more modern, explaining how the two aren't captured by the law or seemingly bothered at all by them following their escape. They appear to have lived a life of a mostly lower middle class to working class family, indicated by the siblings sharing a room and living in an apartment block. Money appears to have been a consistent issue for the family. Whether this is due to poor financial habits or a low earning potential, Mr. Graves appears to be a salaryman with some sort of customer facing role and is likely the breadwinner, whilst the mother seems to work part-time in Chapter 2. The Graves' economical status explains a bit about their actions within the story, mostly on the parents' part, but it certainly does not excuse them. The Coffin, much to no one's surprise, has an extremely bleak world. The entire first episode is set within an apartment building where the two are being held against their will. We quickly learn that their quarantine has already lasted 3 months, and soon after an announcement blares on the TV that the quarantine is being extended a further 2 weeks. This is possibly the worst kind of interminable imprisonment, having your release date constantly moved just out of reach. However, not only are Andrew and Ashley locked in the apartment, they've also run out of supplies. Interacting with the phone in the apartment reveals that Ashley has tried to call for food delivery many times already, but the drivers never appear. Whether they've got the apartment building on a blacklist or are being turned away by the wardens isn't something we yet know. The wardens are not only complicit in their starvation, we see from their interactions with the pair that they enjoy the suffering they cause, and will use the lack of food to taunt and manipulate the Graves into complying with their situation. The woman in 302 is another victim of theirs, trading relations in return for food and anything else she wants. It is stated in the warden's fridge that food is not to be provided to AB occupants. This is referring to the occupant's blood type. AB positive is also known as the universal recipient, but can only donate to other AB positive. This makes them very poor targets for organ harvesting. Perhaps it can be surmised that other occupants are still receiving their rations, so our duo being starved is purely an aspect of them being of an AB blood type. This does not necessarily make sense. The NHS states that around 2% of people have an AB positive blood type and 1% have an AB negative. We hear other occupants of the apartments building calling for help when the ambulance appears in Chapter 1. It is very unlikely to have so many people present of this very rare blood group. We see that the cultist neighbour has also been starved as his fridge is empty. The cultist is a B-type, not AB, but this did not appear to spare him. The rules on who receives food seem to be selectively enforced, perhaps entirely decided by who the wardens like and dislike, since the woman in 302 was listed as an AB type yet still received rations. Television broadcasts proclaiming the quarantine extensions strongly imply that the government is complicit in the plan, seeing that no authority seems to have even attempted to prevent this from happening. The wardens apparently even have the authority to shoot intruders on sight, all under the guise of protecting public health. From searching the opposite apartment, we learn that in fact the entire apartment block is being held as a part of an organ harvesting operation, turning the situation the siblings are in into what more or less amounts to a death camp. Evidently, the government they live under is pretty shady. We even see in Chapter 2 through the newspapers present in the motel room that the other cities are having quarantines declared. Hazmat teams going through block by block sounds like a more systematic approach is being taken. Perhaps Andrew and Ashley were part of an experimental bunch, with too much being lost to suicide via balcony or organ failure from starvation for the harvesting to still be properly viable. It's heavily implied throughout the story that a recurring company we see throughout the game, Toxisoda, is responsible for the contaminated water by way of an industrial accident. Whether this is true is irrelevant. The more interesting facet of this is that it implies that Toxisoda are complicit with this operation, as they're willing to have their PR dragged through the mud like that. Whether this then further implies a merging of corporations and state can't really be commented on unless we learn more in the final chapters. Euthanasia is freely advertised on the TV broadcasts, simply to escape a boring life. If that doesn't speak to the bleakness of the environments these people live in, there isn't much more that could. A key fact that can't be ignored about this world is that not only do cultists exist which practice satanic rituals, but more significant is that these rituals can actually work. The first encounter is of course with Andrew and Ashley's neighbour practicing alone. We learn pretty quickly that the cultist being successful was unexpected. He might actually be the first one to have properly achieved a summoning. We also learn that demons can be dangerous. The cultists operate in multiple towns and cities. We only have 2 confirmed sightings, that of the neighbour and of the group in the town of Chapter 2. We can only speculate as to whether these cultists are alone or whether there's a larger organisation for them, but the existence of a summoning instruction manual alone indicates there being multiple chapters of cultists. The demons which the cultists worship are not easily mirrored in any religion, probably a deliberate choice by Leyley, probably smart too. The rituals are those of a generically evil demonic cult, using big evil pentagrams as runes surrounded by lit wax candles and loud music to guide the demon's path. It's not obvious if the cultists worship the entity whom we interact with. The cultist club worships one called Lord Unknown and is led by a fellow named Six Eyes. Lord Unknown appears to be a lot scarier than our demon and does not appear to speak English. Ironically, the cultists are probably the friendliest group we've met so far, with most of them being far more concerned with eating cake and drinking free coffee than with anything evil. The cultists are completely inept. It's likely that the only reason our neighbour managed to summon anything was because he would have run out of shelf-bought blood in his apartment and resorted to using his own, which contradicts the instructions of Six Eyes. Personally, I think we're quite likely to see at least some semblance of the cult in the final episodes, especially since Andrew has come into face-to-face contact with Six Eyes and managed to summon Lord Unknown. Demons come from their own realm completely separate from the human, with the existence of an in-between realm, well, between them. An appearance in either realm can only be done safely when done via a summoning, and this rule supposedly goes both ways. Sacrifices of human souls appease demons in return for a gift, but don't appear to be mandatory. Lord Unknown does not take a soul when offered one and leaves due to boredom, though perhaps this really is just due to a language barrier. The in-between realm appears to have a number of roles, not only as a mode of transport for people and things to traverse between realms, but there appears to be a way for humans to access it as part of their dreaming. We see this when Ashley has her second vision in the decay route, where she can find our demon watching her visions with interest. It's likely that this realm can only be accessed with magic, which only demons have, but there may be more to explore now that Ashley has had the existence of this realm opened up to her. We can't be sure exactly how trustworthy the visions Ashley receives are. Since the magic all seems to be sourced from the entity, I think it's likely that the visions are all engineered by it to take the siblings on a route more likely to grant it souls. The entity can interpret different timelines and can reveal this information to people. I think it's fairly likely that the talisman does not actually require souls to charge it, but is more of a transactional affair, where in return for a soul the entity will provide a vision to the bearer. The vision concerning Mr. Washing Machine is self-explanatory, but it does prove something. Just because something occurs in a vision does not mean that the vision is going to come true. The entity also has the ability to enter these visions, as he does multiple times, most notably during the decay vision when he is watching the whole thing play out with interest, and during the Never Say Never route where the entity appears in the room of portraits. I think the key to knowing how deeply the entity has interfered is the eyes. They are most visible during the Mr. Washing Machine vision and in the Never Say Never vision. It makes sense that the entity would push the two towards this version of the future, as the most unhealthy yet stable version of the siblings' relationship would be the one which results in the most benefit for the entity. The main themes of the narrative are the relationship between Andrew and Ashley, their toxicity, and their codependency. It all comes together to display a pair who absolutely bring the worst out of each other whilst they circle the drain of depravity. We don't really come across anyone throughout the story who can be described as a good guy or a nice person at all. This fits into the story thematically. The siblings are a reflection of the world around them. If Andrew and Ashley had acted as the morals of their society expected them to, then they would have sat in their apartment until either starving or being taken for harvesting. The cultist neighbour. We only know a few things about this man. He's confined alone, he doesn't want to be. He knows how to summon demons, and has a blood type of B. His function in the game is that of a device to move the story forwards. Since his only request of the entity once summoned is only to escape a situation, he can't reasonably be indicted for his actions. The Wardens. As our only real representation of authority within the world of TCAL, they don't paint a pretty picture. As previously discussed, there can be no further indictment of the character of these two. They willfully imprison their victims, using manipulation and threats to keep them in line. Considering the TV broadcasts, it is likely that they have used violence to achieve their goals before too. It is also heavily implied that the woman in 302 is coerced into pleasing the Wardens for her survival. She denies it in the moment, but from the second Warden's reaction on the walkie-talkie, he isn't taken aback by her offer, implying that Ashley's remarks were true. The girl in 302. She may be naive, but she does not seem to have done anything beyond what she had to do. Ashley considers doing the exact same thing, much to Andrew's chagrin. More on that later. I wouldn't be too surprised if we learn more about what actually happened in room 302 whilst Ashley was sacrificing the second Warden during chapter 3. Mr. Washing Machine. A hitman who kills for money. There's not much more to it in terms of his morality. His existence is interesting, since it means that those in power are aware of and use the services of a man whose practices are definitively illegal, exposing further the corruption of the world which we are experiencing. He notices what is happening and has put two and two together on who it is he's pursuing. The newspaper clipping in his car confirms that the chemical leak reports are part of the same organ harvesting operation that our apartment was a part of. Julia. I believe Julia is another victim of Andrew and Ashley. So far, she seems to have gotten away from it ostensibly unharmed relative to the other victims of the pair. She's a direct example of someone who stood in Ashley's way of controlling her brother. The only thing I can think of that could be interpreted as wrongdoing for her is that we don't hear about her trying to help the siblings in terms of providing food while they're trapped in their coffin. She provided an emotional outlet for some of Andrew's repressed urges and truly attracted the wrath of Ashley. Ashley's concerns about Nina using her to get to Andrew seem to be well-founded, which is uncharacteristically correct for our favourite gremlin. Nina did not deserve the fate she received, but it is indeed what she received. Six Eyes. We never see the leader of the cultists actually do anything evil, but from his instruction manuals and how he acts when he is in front of a crowd versus how he is in private to Andrew, he clearly puts on a publicly pleasing front. It's likely that he has either witnessed a successful summoning or partaken in one, since his eye motifs tell us that he knows more about the demons than a random schmuck. He is therefore clearly worse than other cultists, but so far they appear to be a morally neutral organisation, acting more like a LARPing club who provides snacks with an edgy aesthetic. The Doctor. We never see this character. He's only mentioned by Mrs. Graves as the guy who is in charge of the insurance scam to pass people into the organ harvesting operation. It can be surmised that he is the big bad who is behind everything of importance so far, even if we're never actually going to deal with him. It's pure speculation at this point. There is a bit of a loop in the organ harvesting operation. Toxisoda is claimed by the main rival to cause organ failure. Toxisoda is either owned by or partnered with the water company who enforces the quarantine, and would use this water company's water to make their product. The big conspiracy would be that Toxisoda is indeed causing organ failures, and is supplying poor quality organs to the sufferers at the same time, cornering their own market. The water company being paid off to be an accomplice would still make sense, as their revenues in terms of water usage shouldn't hit a dip if Toxisoda is successful in essentially replacing the populace's primary beverages. To further speculate, could Six Eyes be the same person as the Doctor? For someone who has such a small role, it is odd that Six Eyes is given a portrait. This is why I think he's likely returned some way in the third chapters. The Others. Referring to characters who provide little more than window dressing, but still provide value to contextualising the world the story takes place in. The characteristic that ties all of these people together is their uncaring attitude and rudeness to the two siblings. The shopkeeper we see at the start of chapter 2 is an especially good reflection of the world. The interaction she has with Ashley should be short and pleasant, instead it's confrontational and rude. The friends the senior Graves make in their new neighbourhood validate the parents' decisions to abandon their children. The note we see even shows the well-wisher immediately swivelling to asking for Andrew's textbooks. A message that should consist only of comfort for two parents losing their children instead takes a selfish and never mind insensitive turn. Going forward, I'm going to break the main duo up into their constituent personalities. I think both of them, but Andrew in particular, disassociate from their evil acts, almost by forming separate personalities which will be expanded upon later. Ashley is a goblin-like bundle of impulsiveness, self-loathing and unhealthy attachments. While I have theories on why she is the way she is, alongside things that an armchair psychologist could diagnose her with, this isn't the time to discuss it. We generally see her being fairly pleasant to Andrew, but a toxic, codependent relationship wouldn't be toxic and codependent if it didn't have her horrendous abuse in it. There's also the point to be made that she has no moral compass to speak of and commits some of the most taboo crimes that are possible to commit. Andrew is a depressed emotional burnout and a doormat for the evil tornado that is his sister. He seemingly has more of a moral compass than Ashley, but has a few exceptions. He never feels remorse for his actions, his anxiety and guilt only stemming from potential consequences for what he does. A good way to think about the way the two operate is that Ashley comes up with the ideas, but it's Andrew who thinks them through and gets them to work. If it was not for him, Ashley would never have succeeded, but similarly, without her, he would likely have never escaped the apartment. We only see him taking some kind of moral stance during the Never Say Never route, and when first eating the neighbour. Playing as him during chapter 2 reveals that he is very twisted in his overprotectiveness of his sister, but then, maybe, she doesn't mind. For the most part, Leyley is very similar to her older counterpart. Whilst Ashley flirts and throws tantrums to keep her iron grip on Andrew's soul, Leyley's manipulation focused on threats, blackmail and guilt tripping. During her plot to get rid of Nina, who she saw as her main rival for Andy's attention, she pulls out all of these different tricks to cajole Andy into agreeing to leave Nina locked in her box overnight. Some have suggested that Leyley isn't as immoral as Ashley because Nina's death was not intentional. I'd argue that this doesn't really matter. Nina's death is a direct result of Leyley's machinations and was someone who truly didn't deserve it. An unfortunate part of Andy's character arc is that it appears that he used to be a much more moral person. This set of morals is what causes his trauma with the death of Nina and the way Andy dealt with the corpse of the neighbour cultist. This is very different to the future Andrew personality, who appears to be able to butcher and murder with no reaction or remorse whatsoever. A fairly popular sentiment in the games community that I agree with is that Mrs. Graves is the true antagonist of Chapter 2. She's by far the most dominant force in the relationship between her and her husband. I think this is the root cause of all of the issues the two siblings face. She states that Andrew was born when she was only 15, with Ashley being born 2 years later. Andrew was forcibly parentified and took almost sole care of Ashley, which explains a hell of a lot of the issues the two have. It doesn't really need to be said, but a 15-year-old is not a capable parent, let alone a nurturing and loving parent. Considering that Andrew was 2 when Ashley was born, I think the point is made that his parentification was an obscene act of neglect. The parentification was so thorough that Andy often had to cook for Leyley during their childhood and buy groceries himself. It also has to be noted of how distant Mrs. Graves is to Ashley. In Ashley's final dream sequence featuring the plushies, the pink plushie will not fit at the dinner table, just falling off the seats instead. The spot where the pink plushie can even sit isn't a dining chair, it's just a pulled up stool. This is mirrored to the real world when Andrew and Ashley eat dinner with their parents. With their parents, not of. Ashley is also not sat at his dining chair, but on a pulled up stepladder. She also reveals that she knew about the siblings' role in Nina's death, or at least guessed it. If she hadn't kept it to herself, the two probably would have been able to get some kind of help. To summarise, Mrs. Graves is an exceptionally poor mother for both her extreme neglect and essentially selling her children to an organ harvesting operation. She is willing to lie to Andrew about her actions in the decay route, by the way. A huge theme for this character is that he has next to no agency in his life. He has almost zero presence within his children's lives, or honestly, even his own. His morality can only be defined through his complicity with his wife's actions. Mr. Graves is not an evil man, and he is not a victim. He is simply a passenger of life with no agency, not even significant enough of a person to get an in-game portrait. As it says on the store page, the duo have an extremely toxic and extremely codependent relationship, and they truly bring out the worst in each other. To reiterate, Andrew is what puts Ashley's impulses into practice. Without her, he never would have done a single one of his horrific acts. The girl in the box would probably never have known him without Ashley as a connection, and the murders that occur in-game would almost certainly have never happened. I believe that without Ashley, it's even possible that Andrew would not have been sold out to the organ harvesting operation, since he was such an easy child. Witnessing Ashley's demonic interactions has us notice that she is constantly referred to with the title of Tar Soul. She does not treat the reveal of being a Tar Soul as a shock in Chapter 1. In fact, she completely dismisses it, like she does with most things that don't directly relate to her short-term goals. Being a Tar Soul is something that holds some significance in this universe. It is the sole reason why the entity is so intrigued by Ashley, and why it's so willing to make further deals with her. Perhaps a Tar Soul isn't as valuable to a demon when compared to a normal human soul, as the entity doesn't seem too interested in stealing a Tar Soul either. Taking a quick look at the term Tar Soul, it sounds very similar to the British insult of arsehole. Maybe that's deliberate? Either way, a Tar Soul is not something you're born with. It appears to be the case that a Tar Soul is the nurtured result of sustained evil acts. Ashley and Leyley's routine abuse of her brother, and the vile murder of Nina when paired with the lack of remorse, will be what conditioned her soul to be like this. We understand this growing approach to a soul being tar-like, due to the fact that in the sane ending, Ashley collects souls within her dream, each one likely representing one of her victims. The final soul is an unhatched Tar Soul, which she releases. This represents her placing her trust in Andrew and setting him free, symbolising how their relationship could become more healthy and be based on a foundation of solid friendship, rather than the abyss of toxicity it has been so far. Following the never say never route has the potential to have Andrew become another Tar Soul. When Ashley proclaims him as her pride and joy, the entity is far more interested in him. Andrew's embrace of his darker tendencies is likely to be what's gaining him favour with the entity. I have written and rewritten this section multiple times. I can only make this video make sense in my mind if the two protagonists are given their own section for discussion. Breaking their analyses up into the lists of other characters does both of them a disservice and makes it too difficult to understand the big picture. Ashley Graves, the Tar Soul, is a deeply disturbed individual marked by her demonically neglectful upbringing. The primary themes of her character are her fear of abandonment, her possessiveness of Andrew, and her hatred of anyone or anything that might break her iron grip over Andrew's mind. In herself, she has next to no moral compass beyond looking out for her own emotional well-being, and very rarely displays any form of remorse for what she does. A big difference we see when playing as her versus playing as Andrew is that for her, Nina's name is completely blanked out. Nina is not even a person, she is just a hindrance to her who has been put in the ground. Growing up, she had few friends, and those she did have were using her in order to form connections with Andy. Even her parents had no interest in her, not expecting the challenges present in raising her and being unwilling to take the time necessary. The one person in her life who has been unconditionally good to her, has cared for her, has celebrated her birthday when no one else would, is Andrew. Or more specifically, Andy. Andy, the gooey marshmallow who loved his sister but could never dream of hurting someone. Andy who has nightmares every night with only her being able to make them go away. Andy who will never leave her. Ashley's biggest insecurity is that the grown-up Andrew will no longer need her. This is why she insists on calling him Andy and will do anything in her power to break him down mentally. The trauma she causes from forcing him to take part in Nina's death is her biggest source of power in their adult lives as far as she is concerned. She requires constant affirmation of Andrew's love whenever her insecurities are piqued, such as hearing him refer to someone else as pretty or even him having other friends. As a side note, her entire view of friendship is very skewed. Her first assumption in hearing that their parents have friends in their new neighbourhood is that they're having multiple affairs. She also consistently uses highly gendered insults when dealing with people she doesn't like. They're a slut, a whore, a hussy, or a floozy. The implication with all of this is that if Andrew is involved with anyone other than her, she's viewing it as if he's somehow cheating on her. To her, the only acceptable state of being is complete devotion. Any less and she's insecure. The likely reason to this is that Ashley views herself as ultimately unlovable, and if Andrew is ever presented with a choice between her and someone else, she will always lose from her perspective. For the vast majority of the time we spent in her shoes, she does not believe Andrew is happy to be with her. It is only in the burial ending that this changes. Towards the end of Chapter 1, Ashley realises that her grip is slipping. Hearing Andrew refer to the girl in 302 as pretty flares up her jealousy and she throws a fit. In an almost classic display of abuse, she screams at her brother, pulling his hair and insulting him. She crosses the line by bringing up the death which the two of them caused a decade ago. And finally, Andrew has had enough. He grips her around the throat. Taking this as a pathetic attempt at rebellion, and knowing that Andy will always back down, Ashley laughs. When asking for a reason not to kill her, she states the obvious. She's the only one who can make his night terrors go away, but it's too late for that. It's too far gone. Andrew is sick of his sister, and in this moment is finally retaking control of his life. Tightening his grip, she starts to feel her life ebb away until, realising that doing this cements her as his master, he lets go and finds his leverage in her ultimatum. So long as it is just the two of them together, she will behave. Because of course those are her terms. They have lived completely alone and starving for months, yet she was happy. She had her Andy. It doesn't matter that he is in a downward spiral, and it doesn't matter that they're days or weeks from dying, so long as the previous statements hold true. This needy obsession with Andrew is a big change from how we see her thoughts on him during the adventures of Andy and Leyley and the Very, Very Quiet. Better known as the Nina situation. The obsession is still there, and is the driving force behind Leyley's plot. Her view of Andy at this point is one of her toys who needs to stay in his own box. Her goal is to keep the hussies away from him and to keep him as her emotional prisoner. Her guilt trips and manipulations are far more childish, naturally, calling Andy a liar and turning on the crocodile tears to elicit Andy's protective instincts. As he has been thoroughly parentified at this point, Andy will know that a part of his responsibilities are to keep Leyley happy, which seemed to be a lot of his initial motivation. As we know, this adventure results in Leyley attempting to blackmail Andy. She mostly succeeds, with Andy becoming her subservient lapdog for years. As they both grow older, they have become so intertwined that their codependence is set in stone. Andrew knows that only she can be confided in, as only she knows his dark history, and as always, he is the only island of happiness in Ashley's life of abandonment. We know that Andrew has had girlfriends, but Ashley has without fail scared them all off through stalking and harassment. During Andrew's lucid dream, we can listen to Julia's missed calls, and we see Ashley say some truly despicable things to her. Julia is someone who at one time was Ashley's friend and was deeply affected by the loss of Nina, at some point turning to self-harm. It's astounding really that Julia lasted with Andrew as long as she did, with the kind of things she would be hearing from his sister. This is not our first hint of Ashley being sus, which we will expand on later. The main way that Ashley differs from Leyley is that Ashley is far more skilled at manipulating Andy. Sexual tension is littered throughout the entire game and mostly engineered by Ashley. She relishes in having Andrew wax lyrical on her virtues, expressing her talents and beauty for the most mundane of tasks. This all ties strongly into her character design. For all intents and purposes, Ashley represents a stereotypical early 2000s goth girl. Dark hair, dark clothes, and her choice in clothing are definitely hallmarks of this. Within the universe, she's clearly also considered attractive, as the warden Andrew kills is stated to have leered at her back when the pair still received food. She also says that she is a virgin, which makes sense considering she very clearly has no interest in people outside of Andrew and is never mentioned as being popular at all. As a side note, if she's this hot and still an outcast, absolutely run away. Rather than replacing Leyley's bullying tactics, Ashley has found extra avenues to control Andrew. She's clearly aware that Andrew responds well to her bubbly and flirty persona, which is why that is the face she presents in almost every context. It is only when Andrew is prickling her insecurities that the other, much meaner side of her lashes out to break him down. In contrast, she is at her absolute happiest when she thinks Andrew is slipping back into his Andrew persona. Which makes sense, as this is where she is most secure in being his object of interest. Whenever she perceives Andrew as being more submissive to her whims, she becomes over the moon. This is most prominent during the Decay ending. She is constantly barbing Andrew by calling him Andy due to her insecurities over his personality changing, taking brief relief whenever he doesn't react or answers to Andy. Similarly, she is ecstatic when Andrew is happy to be fed human soup during the Burial ending. Similar to Ashley, Andrew's design harkens back to the emo sad boy aesthetic of the early 2000s. The long black jumper, the dishevelled long black hair and the ripped jeans all go along with this too. His face is almost always either a deadpan side glance or a smirk. The store page describes Andrew as a doormat extraordinaire. This is certainly true in their younger days. Andy was at the absolute beck and call of his younger sister. Even now, Andrew feels extremely protective of her. A way she often provokes a reaction in him is to flaunt her transactional view of intimacy. Just as Andy is Leyley's toy to be kept in a box, Ashley is Andrew's porcelain doll to protect from the world. Despite her obnoxious, psychotic behaviour and absolutely unhinged psyche, she is raw perfection to him. Ashley is completely unaware of the utter devotion he has for her. To put it simply, this man is apocalyptically, abysmally down for his sister. His soul strives for the conflict the two of them have, and this is how his dependency on her shines through. Without her, life has no meaning. Ashley is by far the most shocking sibling to an outsider, and on many people's first playthrough will appear to be Andrew's abuser. On closer inspection, it is clear that Andrew is at least just as bad as her, if not worse. We've already examined how Andrew is the tool to put Ashley's ridiculous plans into sense and action. So let's explore his emotions. A huge point of conflict for Andrew is his guilt associated with murdering Nina and with eating his neighbour. However, besides Nina, his guilt will only focus on his fear of consequences. This is why he gets so frustrated with Ashley and works so hard to make her plans make sense. Because, if he fails, they'll be separated, and his porcelain doll will be exposed to the world. In my opinion, Andy is a separate personality than Andrew. To be more precise, Andrew is aware of which of his character traits make up the Andy persona, and is trying to metaphorically cut those out of his brain. The guilt, compassion and submissiveness of Andy are all viewed as negative, since they are what held him under his sister's dominion for so long. This is why Ashley is so desperate for Andrew to accept the return of Andy, and insists on calling him this. It's symbolic of the control she once had over him, and his burying of Andy shows how he is outgrowing this power dynamic. Do not take what I'm saying as me trying to diagnose Andrew with some kind of disorder such as DID. I don't personally think we gain anything from trying to do that to fictional characters aside from a form of brand recognition. The same goes for arguments about Ashley being a psychopath or having borderline personality disorder. A lot of these theories are very compelling, but I simply don't want to engage with that. Repressing the Andy persona and forcing himself to be uncaring clearly takes a toll on Andrew. After killing the warden, the first thing he says to his sister is the following. "Come Leyley, let's go and play." I take this to mean that Andrew is falling back on Andy as a coping mechanism. This line is what kickstarts the series of events where the siblings go from reactive characters to proactive, and he commits actions that would scar almost anyone with next to no emotional response. Another very key aspect of Andrew is how he is very capable of slipping on a mask whenever it suits him. He's actually very impressive with how quickly he thinks on his feet when lying to someone in front of him, to the point where even his own mother seems to mostly believe him, and even Ashley is unable to keep up with what he's saying. He bluffs his way into the cultist base when he visits it with Ashley to summon Lord Unknown by playing on the guilt of the idiot cultist. He clearly has similar manipulative tendencies to Ashley. He also comes up with the plan to lure Wood and Dave upstairs by using the girl from 302. The point to take away from this is that whilst Ashley is the main way we witness manipulation within the Graves siblings' relationship, Andrew absolutely engages in it too. The main difference in how he does it reflects their differences in personality, it's just more calculated. There's a lot more to say about our boy, but we'll grant that its own section. After tying the parents up, Andrew will have a realisation about his father. Mr. Graves is a complete doormat. He has always done whatever his wife has wanted and has no agency. Perhaps they're not so different after all. This theme is very present once you notice it. All of Mr. Graves' traits are amplified versions of Andrew's. His depressed nature, his lack of agency, and his willingness to do anything for his wife. This is especially interesting when we take notice of Mrs. Graves and Ashley. The two utterly hate each other during the time frame we're present for, perhaps for good reason. but their personalities still reflect each other to a huge degree. When finding the present in Ashley's car dream, she finds a lemon muffin which gives her a flashback to one of her birthdays. Towards the end of this flashback, the siblings are watching Hypergore Splatterbrains 2. It turns out they still have it, despite having rented it months ago. Mrs. Graves' response to having missed the return date is to just never return to that store and to keep the movie. Andy comments, "Ugh, what short-term thinking?" The exact same issue he has with his sister. It's important to acknowledge this, as it shows how important the two parents have been in modelling their children's behaviour, despite how neglectful they've been. Most of those watching this will have probably heard about the funny incest game. To break away from droning on about lore, this game does an exceptional job of displaying this taboo. I don't think it's absolutely vital to the plot, but with how disturbingly it is presented, it certainly adds emotional weight to how we understand the story. Replaying the game gives a whole new dimension to the siblings' interactions, especially with how Andrew acts and talks after we're given some time with his inner thoughts. I do find it interesting how a scene which comprises of only a few lines of dialogue and nothing graphic is the centrepiece of discussion around the story. I think we can take this as an indication of how desensitised we are as a people. Incest is really one of the few avenues left to truly shock someone, despite it not being anywhere near as immoral as what the other things the siblings do. Despite this, it is what people get hung up on. As a quick disclaimer, I'm not defending the practice, obviously, but I think it's worth noting that it is the most talked about aspect of the story despite it being completely optional. As has been said already, the two characteristics which explain Ashley and Andrew's relationship in its entirety are their codependency and their toxicity. We've already explored Ashley's obsession in terms of her need to have her feelings constantly affirmed by her brother. The two do have a very compelling relationship in the game. They both have the same dark sense of humour and sardonic quips about the world. This is partly why the story is so intriguing, as the utter darkness of the world and story is in stark contrast to the oftentimes very silly interactions the two have. Evidence of Ashley having more than platonic feelings for her brother more or less revolves around her messages to Julia. Take the line here. "You can fuck him, I can't." It implies what is later confirmed. Ashley would happily engage in incest if it meant that Andrew would finally belong to her. The two things that have been stopping it from happening are Andrew's moral compass, which is rapidly degrading, and lucky interventions of chance. The best example of this is the sofa chomp scene in Chapter 2. After waking Andrew up from her dream with her threats to do things to him if he doesn't comply, she once again extols that her obsessive protectiveness and jealousy is for his benefit, saying that other girls would gobble him up for his gooey marshmallow core. She's clearly talking about Andy, not Andrew here. She then demonstrates by biting him on the cheek, and Andrew reacts positively. He laughs and cradles her head. She was not expecting this, look at how wide her eyes went. I reckon that if Mrs. Graves had not walked in at that second, the two were dangerously close to making out. I mean, just look at the scene Mrs. Graves sees. Ashley is in a more than compromising position, and Andrew has a very strategically placed pillow. This kind of boundary being broken is very present throughout the whole story. Ashley's determination to separate Andrew only seems to go so far as to removing other females from his life. We see no mention of male friends at all. I think this all links back to her warped view on sexuality being either purely transactional or the ultimate act of love with no in-between. This, I think, represents the shift in Ashley's goals for Andrew from plaything to partner, which applied as she grew older. Her thinking of and treating Andrew like her husband helps to contextualise a lot of her actions. Her telling him that he's supposed to tell her she's pretty, her inner monologue of their argument in the car being a lover's spat, even her whole use of the silent treatment, usually reserved for partners. To flip the coin to the other side, Ashley is the source of Andrew's own psychosis. We only really get hints of this in Chapter 1, when Andrew implies that starving to death is preferable to letting Ashley sleep with a neighbour or a warden to get food. His reaction is very strong for something that was a joke. This happens again when Ashley jokes about listing herself as a call girl outside the motel. It's only in Chapter 2 we start to see just how down bad he is. A bombshell reveal is made when interacting with the bed he's been sharing with Ashley in the motel. He fakes his nightmares to spend time with her. Now, they do still happen, but not nearly as often as he acts like they do. Andrew is unusually touchy-feely with his sister. This boundary is normal for younger kids, but is usually phased out as the kids grow up. But then there isn't much normal about their childhood at all. At almost any point the two are interacting for an extended period, the pair will touch each other in some way. In their parents' kitchen when discussing their plan of action, we see Andrew just casually intertwining his fingers through Ashley's belt loops. Seeing this is what prompts Mrs. Graves to tell them that they need to move out and to be separate. She has probably been uneasy about their relationship dynamics for quite some time by this point. Whenever Ashley feels happy with Andrew, she will throw herself into a hug. In the rare times Andrew feels happy about his relationship with Ashley, he'll hold her close and affectionately nuzzle her hair. A quick sidetrack to talk about the Westermarck effect. To give a TLDR of both my previous studies and the Wikipedia article, the hypothesis states that living with someone with the same social dynamics as a sibling while you are below the age of 6 more or less removes them from your pool of potential partners in the future. In Western society, this applies to most multi-child households, with the most interesting case study outside of this setting being those of Israeli kibbutz settings, where even people who had no relation would be subject to the Westermarck effect. The Graves siblings are a clear example of where their stunted emotional development and overwhelmingly negative parental guidance has caused this effect to not properly manifest. As research in this area suggests, this effect is not enough to prevent attraction in all cases. As with any research into the human psyche, there are edge cases, and the social pressure and norms of the society the people affected live in can be what ultimately determines whether any attraction is acted on. That final addendum is what is controlling Andrew. His reaction to the vision in the never say never route is not that of disgust, it is embarrassment. Like with the rest of his conscience, he isn't bothered by the act, but by the fact that Ashley has seen his hidden desires. Andrew does not follow this up by asserting to Ashley that their relationship can never cross that line. Instead, he asks her to tell him it's not like that. Andrew will not bring himself to shut that path down because his most repressed desire is for exactly that to happen. To tie his feelings back to Julia, what little we see of their relationship has a lot of implications. We've already spoken about Ashley's voicemails, but where is it we actually learn about this? In Andrew's dream. There's no way we could have listened to this unless he knew full well what his sister was doing. We also see the shadowy figure of Ashley staring into Julia's window. Seeing Andrew's only in-person interaction with Julia, his attitude during their conversation is that of someone who's quite annoyed with their partner. His facial expression when they embrace imply he's not really all that attracted to her either. Finally, he asks her to tie her hair up for him. Who can you think of who regularly ties their hair up? At an absolute minimum, Andrew was trying to repress his feelings for Ashley by transferring them to Julia, trying to make her look like his sister is just icing on the cake. There's a possibility that he's used his whole relationship with Julia as a way to stoke Ashley's jealousy. Given how he isn't in it for Julia's sake, the way he is able to move on from her so easily is further evidence of this. In the 2 currently available chapters, there are 2 main paths we can take. These 2 paths have their own minor variations, with each main path leading to a separate chapter for the finale. Firstly, we should analyse the decay ending, which is the worst ending for the pair, despite it perhaps being better for the people around the brother and sister. As the name implies, decay showcases the breakdown of Andrew and Ashley's relationship. The turning points are Ashley's lack of trust in her brother, either refusing to let him prepare the ritual for their parents or overhearing his breakdown and brief attempt of rebellion. Perhaps a better way to frame Chapter 2 as a whole is that the main plot is the siblings' relationship being put to their absolute test, whether it reaches the breaking point or is tempered into something stronger. For their relationship not to fail, both siblings need to place their trust in the other and have it validated. The real choice being made by Andrew, when his parents offer him an olive branch, is whether this position he is in with Ashley is actually what he wants after all. Decay is the option that makes Andrew understand that he is truly unhappy with how everything has turned out. He recognises Ashley as the blight that she is. This emphasises the toxicity of their relationship. Once she returns from withdrawing cash, he will immediately fall back into line, but the realisations of his feelings have broken him. In a way, his Andy persona is still present, as the utter wrongness of what he's been doing is hitting him. The harm is hit home when Ashley finishes summoning the entity and degrades Andrew to his face. Andrew's whole manner of speaking with Ashley is different after this. He's sullen and irritable with her, which is a stark contrast to before the olive branch. Ashley is desperate to receive an affirmation that Andy is there and loves her still, but that affirmation is not being provided. As a result, she starts reading into his behaviour and seeing things that aren't there. Andrew isn't retaliating when she calls him Andy, which she takes as a positive. He has no visible reaction to butchering the parents, and this makes Ashley smile, compared to the unease she feels during the burial routes. The reality sets in a little for Ashley, and she starts trying to build Andy back up, repeating that she loves him, but he will not have it. They make a soup of their parents, because of course they do, and Ashley gives us a speech on how by eating humans she gains power, and is proving that she is at the top of the food chain. Because she's normal. The pair argue, and Ashley goes to bed alone to have a vision. In this version of the vision, Ashley is chased across the dream world by an unseen being. The entity is watching in interest to see how she copes with this. The being is revealed to be Andrew, and it does not take long for Ashley to realise what he wants. After a short chase, he catches her, and the only remaining choice is whether Ashley will use her handgun, presuming the cylinder wasn't emptied into Mr. Washing Machine. Whichever choice is made, a sibling will die. It is heavily implied that whoever survives will quickly follow suit, as the reality of life without their obsession hits them. We don't know what has caused Andrew to seek this totality of revenge. It's likely a build-up of tension since the breakdown of the relationship between them. Waking up from this vision has Ashley reflect on their relationship so far. Andrew being violent or even trying to kill her is not a new thing. For once, she's scared of him. Potentially to avoid a self-fulfilling prophecy, she refrains from telling Andrew what she's seen and tries to move on. But Andrew is still different with her. For the first time in the present, Andrew starts losing his temper with her when the bag with the skull splits and the chapter ends on a very dark note, with Andrew stating that he wishes for nothing more than to lock Ashley in the trunk of his car and kill them both. The difference is that now, he might mean it. The burial ending, as previously mentioned, requires that both of the siblings prove their trust in each other. Ashley has to actively make the decision to leave Andrew alone with her parents, and he must refuse the olive branch they offer, taking confidence in the choices he has already made and giving immense joy to the eavesdropping Ashley. Mrs. Graves immediately assumes they have crossed the line into incest. She is wrong, but no one can blame her for this conclusion. Ashley immediately interrupts to put on a lovey-dovey show to discuss their parents further. The main differences in the following scenes, compared to the decay route, are that Andrew is much more upbeat and willing to play around. Never mind that the playing consists of teasing Ashley with a fistful of gore. This new side of Andrew unsettles Ashley. She's used to him being racked with guilt whenever they commit one of their atrocities, not to be leaning into his role. It's not the Andrew she knows, and it's certainly not her Andy. He notices her despondency, and in an interesting role reversal asks her to open up to him, mirroring a scene from earlier in the chapter 1. In general though, she has a great time with this Andrew. She's absolutely over the moon with how he allows her to spoon feed him the soup they make. He will wax lyrical about her cooking abilities and refer to her as beloved. Like before, Ashley has the idea to use the freshly recharged talisman to have a vision, and Andrew wants in. Thanks to their relationship being pretty great right now, they settle on holding hands while they sleep.
Aww.
Ashley's dream is rife with symbolism. The pink plushie is alone in her room while the family eats dinner. No matter what is done, the pink plushie just doesn't fit in. It will always fall out of the perfect family scene. Ashley cannot interrupt mother and father plushie from their dinner. The only one who can be pulled away to spend time with her is the green plushie. Putting them together has pink express its happiness. Taking green away causes the pink to demonically scream. A new scene is then revealed. The yellow and purple plushies stand beneath a wedding arch. If pink is taken to her friends, the surrounding flowers wilt. Clearly it is green who belongs there. He appears to be quite the ladies' man. Naturally, we must prevent this, so yellow must go into the trash and purple must be locked in her box where she can stay. Mother and father plushies go into the cooking pot as nature intended, and we are finally able to put green, the best thing ever, in the cage, where no one can try and take him away from us ever again. We then find ourselves with a picture of green presenting pink with a gift, either a dagger or flower depending on what we choose. Of course, the dagger makes no sense here. We're then presented with a series of stills of green and pink together, followed by pink watching green and yellow together. We must decide their emotions at each stage. Of course, when together, Green and Pink are in love. We see Green venturing out to Yellow to experience heartbreak. This heartbreak makes Pink happy. The path forward is opened, and we take it to see stills from Pink's past life, accompanied with Green sat in his cage. We take the key from the siblings' portrait to release him back into our hands and go to each of the friends, classmates and parents' portraits to be replaced with friends, soulmates and family. Green will replace everyone from our past. The entity appears, we take Green with us to meet him and are granted a vision. It's Andrew and Ashley engaging in pillow talk. The previously discussed line has been well and truly crossed at this point. Ashley stokes the fires of Andrew's libido and we experience a cut to black. The dialogue mirroring that of the blood oath, all the way back in the very, very quiet. Ashley wakes up. Andrew is clearly mortified, but the toothpaste cannot be put back into the tube. We've discussed his reaction already. The main difference from the sane route here is the vision. There is no embarrassment when waking up from the sane route, as no vision has occurred at all, and they both continue none the wiser. Eager to forget his perceived humiliation, Andrew pushes the issue aside and they continue as normal. Andrew is noticeably nicer in this route than in the decay route and will continue to play about with Ashley as they're disposing of the bodies. On the bridge, the two begin to play fight, and Andrew pulls her into a long embrace before turning to smoke. We see that the entity has marked his palm, for what reason we can't be sure, and then it cuts to black. Things that stick out during this ending, especially during the vision, are that Andy seems to be well and truly dead. The burial has been completed. Unlike in Decay, where Ashley attaches herself to the talisman as her only way of being sure she can keep Andrew around, she realises that despite everything, if all of her abuse, gaslighting and manipulation fails, she has one guaranteed method as a fallback to keep Andrew around. Her view of sex is as transactional as ever, but it will be the first time she's able to put it into practice for both of their benefits. As with any cringe video essay, a conclusion needs to be made. How about the canon ending? Considering that of the final chapters, one will follow on from Decay and one will follow on from Burial, either can be taken to be canon depending on your preferences. As with the rest of Nemle's work, it doesn't matter which choices were made, just that the story has been told. In my opinion, the most compelling ending is the Never Say Never ending. This is presented as the most unhealthy way for the pair to go, and the only ending where the entity makes a direct appearance. But they seem to have reached a less toxic relationship as a result, and this is as close to a happy ending as I think the pair will ever have. All I can say for certain is that the story of a game has never affected me in the way this one has. I only hope that now, as someone is listening to my ramblings on the internet, I can feel a sense of closure about it all. The best part about it is that there are still topics to talk about in this, imagery of coffins, dissecting the name of the game, it all has so much potential. The only bit I'm not looking forward to is doing this all over again when Chapter 3 is released. I'd love to hear other people's takes on the game and its story. As I said before, one of the whole reasons I even made this was because I have no other outlet for my thoughts. If this video does strike a chord with you, please let me know. Obviously, I've never done this before and I'd really appreciate some feedback. Thank you very much.